Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Peach. I'm the one that married the guy. He starts a podcast in less than 2 days, and I'm over here waiting for him to get me to marry him. It took him 7 years. I'm still wondering about that. But hey, first, check this out.
Our purchasing decision-making is gone. When we used to have to cash a 20 to buy something, it doesn't happen anymore. We just swipe, right? And then on Amazon, one-click purchase. Optical purchasing. This is just out of control. Our society today has taken away any friction that would require thinking. And as a result, since we've taken away the $20 bill from McDonald's, McDonald's makes $3.50 more per meal than they ever have in the past. And we are finding ourselves completely in debt, not able to save, not able to give, and we're just a complete wreck.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Money Peach podcast. Excited that you are here listening with us. And holy crap, are we bringing on an all-star guest today? Wow. Darryl Lyons was highly recommended to me by many people, and I started reading through all of his accolades, and I'm thinking, this guy is way better than me, which is why I wanted him to come on the show. Now, Darryl is an expert in many things, but the reason why I'm bringing him on the show is he's an expert in behavior and money. Why does that matter? Well, let's see here. Personal finance, or our money, is 10% fifth grade math, 90% behavior. Okay, so I think we should focus on the behavior. I don't know about you. I think it makes more sense to focus on the behavior. So Darryl's come on the show, talk about some of the tips, tricks, and ideas that he uses to focus on the behavior of money. And I can tell you from somebody that has paid off $52,000 in debt, it was like 99% behavior for us because the math was all done in a spreadsheet, done for us. So without further ado, let me bring on Darryl Lyons. Alrighty, Darryl, excited to have you on the show. I'm looking through the notes here, and I want to make sure I do you justice here because you have a lot of accolades here. It's pretty impressive. So Darryl Lyons, you're a personal finance expert. You're an author. You have a relationship with Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey actually endorsed your book, and you're on his investment council. And then you're pretty involved in your community. You're co-founder of Pax Financial Group, which is also part of the top 5,000 fastest growing companies in America, and you've been voted the best place to work. And you've had accolades from the mayor of San Antonio, 2 different mayors, and the list goes on and on and on. So how did I get you on my podcast is what I want to know.
Well, you have a great show, frankly. You've got great guests. When I've listened to your show, your heart is really to be able to provide transformation to the lives of people who are just confused about money. So I like to hang out with those kind of people. So I'm just as honored.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. This is going to be fun. So just kind of give the listeners a background of what we're going to be talking about is, yes, you are the co-founder of Pax Financial Group, but I think one thing that really sets you apart is I have met so many different financial planners, different financial advisors, and they have a heart of gold, but they're really passionate about merely the numbers, and that is it. And I think the numbers are important, but one of the things I found out about you that I really liked is you take a whole new take on behavior and money. And like I've told people on this podcast many times, it's 10% math and it's 90% behavior. So instead of bringing somebody to come on and talk merely about the numbers, I wanted somebody to come on and really talk about what's going on with behavior and money. But before we jump into all that, I want our listeners to get to know you a little bit, Darryl. So give us a little bit of background, where you live, and kind of tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I've been in the south part of Texas my whole life. I love Texas. I made a decision not to be a Wall Street guy because I wanted to stay in this area. I've got a lot of family here and a lot of roots here. And so I actually grew up without money. And so when I graduated high school, we lived in a little trailer right off Highway 90 in a town called Castroville. And I became curious about why people had houses without wheels. How do you get money to do that? And I just literally 17, I became emphatically nerdy, curious about money all the way to today. And I'm still curious. And it's not because of money itself. It's because how money moves behavior and sometimes becomes a crux in relationships like marriages, and it sends people to college. And so my curiosity has now gotten to the point where I just really enjoy helping people with money. Today, I have a wife who, by the grace of God, gets to stay home with our 4 kiddos, and I'm very active with their lives. And so we're enjoying that journey. And right now I'm co-founding a company that has 20 employees, and we are dead set focused on serving Middle America. We want to provide hope to Middle America through money, and that's our mission. And we celebrate our mission. One of the things that we do is we have this gong in our office where if somebody has experienced hope, whether they're retiring or they have found an element of peace in a conversation. Maybe they were overwhelmed and they were just breathing a sigh of relief. We actually have a gong that we hit in the office and everyone claps and celebrates. We measure and monitor hope just like somebody measures and monitors a birthday or anniversary. We measure and monitor hope in our office and celebrate it. So we're having a really good time in San Antonio providing transformation to the community. So it's a calling for me.
So Darryl, when you said middle America, are you talking more of the Midwest or a middle class in general?
It's such an ambiguous question. So Pew Research said middle America is those that make between $42,000 and $125,000, but that really doesn't work because you could have 8 kids or you could live in certain demographics. And so middle America for me is not geographic. If you're not on food stamps, if you're not living on government subsidies and you don't have a yacht, you're just in between the two, you're middle America. So I know it's a loose definition. It's really that demographic because that group of demographic, those people that struggle with braces and vacations and Christmas, when I have money conversations, it's very focused on serving those people.
So I think the majority of our listeners, the majority of the people that I know, if not everybody that I hang out with, would fall into this. Like you just said, they're worrying about braces, they're worrying about retirement. Before we hit record here, I was preparing for this interview. And so some of the biggest questions that I have, Darryl, people are listening to the show and they might send us a message saying, how much should I have saved by age 25 or age 30 or so on? Or, you hear, what's the hard and fast rule? Is it 4% at retirement? Should I have $1 million? And there's all these questions. And I don't think there's enough people either giving the right advice to this. And so one of the things is you talk a lot about behavior with the money. But before we jump into the behavior part, I just wanted to see, as I was pulling off some articles here, I'm on NerdWallet's site. It's a study actually done by Fidelity and T. Rowe Price. They talked about how much you should have saved out by each age group. And I'll just kind of throw these numbers out there and tell me what you think here. So It says here, we'll just start at age 25. They said from there, you need to start saving 15% of your gross salary if you want to be on track. So 15% of your gross salary, let's say you make $50,000 a year. So you need to be right at about $7,500 a year if my math's correct. Is that right?
That's right.
According to this. And then it says by age 30, so 5 years later, you should have about 50% of your income saved. So if you make $50,000 a year, you should have about roughly $25,000 set aside. These are pulling from the Fidelity Investments and T. Rowe Price. If you go to age 40, you should have 2 times your annual salary. So if you make 50, you should have 100. Age 50, you should have 4 times. Age 60, 6 times. And age 67, which they're defining as the retirement age of today's terms, have 8 times your annual salary. So if you're making $50,000 a year, 5 times 8, you should have about $500,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, the math's right. I would suggest, just from what I've studied, it's actually a little higher than that, but I think you're in the ballpark.
Okay, and these are not my numbers, by the way. These are just, I'm pulling this off of Fidelity's and T. Rowe Price's, their stats here. So the reason why is I think everybody should have some kind of benchmark to feel either good or maybe concerned about. I don't want to say feel bad, but be concerned about. So I'll give you an example. I'm 35 years old. If I'm looking at this, for me, it's real simple to say, okay, I know what my salary is, or I know what our income is. And at 35, I should have about 1.5 times my salary saved up to be on track for a good retirement. If I'm above that, great. If I'm below that, then I need to be a little worried. But you're saying it's actually a little bit off. You need more than what the study's saying.
Yeah, I think you're close. My studies have just a little bit different, and I take it from the Millionaire Next Door. That they did a study in there, and their formula is just slightly different. So a 35-year-old in your case might need $125,000. I'm going to suggest it's $175,000. So we're really not that far off. So if I'm a listener right now, I'm actually going to lean into your Fidelity survey and focus on that one. And once you hit that one, you just give yourself an attaboy or attagirl and just move on from there.
I agree. I totally agree. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about, if you don't mind me kind of shifting gears here, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a full-time firefighter. So I get to talk with brand new firefighters coming on the job, and I run into them. They're like, oh, you're the guy with the podcast, The Money Guy, right? I'm like, yeah, that's me. And so they go, I got a question for you, of course. And the first thing is, how much should I be putting away for retirement, or how much do I need to have at retirement? So I'll ask them, I'll say, well, what do you think you need to have? And right now, the number that you get thrown out all the time is $1 million. So if I could have $1 million. And so I started doing a little bit more research preparing for our talk today. And apparently $1 million is not even close to enough. And here's why I say that. I was just reading a study by CNBC saying, if you are a 32-year-old millennial, okay, and you're planning to retire at 67 years old with $1 million, if you factor in inflation, that's actually going to put you below the poverty line. That's wild to me. I mean, you think right now that, I'm a 35-year-old guy. If I can have $1 million saved up, wow, we're going to be A-okay. But $1 million, 33, 34 years from now actually puts you at the poverty line. How does that math work?
Well, it's unbelievable. Inflation's the craziest thing, and it's something that I don't appreciate. But if you do look back even 15 years, anybody listening and recognize how much things cost, take the electronics and don't think about those, but just other goods, even movie tickets. Just prices go up every year, and it just gets crazier and crazier. And the reality is people are going to need that. And I think the generation that you had referenced is going to need it more than ever, because a lot of people today are depending on Social Security. In fact, today's many in the community that you're speaking with, their parents are relying on Social Security to be 50% of their paycheck in retirement. And the younger generations are not going to have that Social Security. I mean, the probabilities are just not as likely. And so it requires those that are younger to save and to be very diligent. We have to also plan for the certainty of uncertainty. I recently had a client who was 60 years old, diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And you think about that for a second. He put off saving. He loved to spend. He loved to fly fish. Savings just wasn't a priority. There was stuff to buy and things to do. So at 60, he did not have near enough. He will run out of money. It's a sad situation. And so the point is that we can't depend on Social Security, and we have to plan for the certainty of uncertainty. And you referenced the 15% number. That number is a beautiful, beautiful number, but not one just to reference in awe. To me, younger generations, it has to happen. I mean, it has to happen. It's so critical today.
So going back to what you just said, younger generation, I think that's key. If I could go, I think anybody will say this, if I could go back in time knowing what I know now, I would do things much differently. Meaning, if I had a choice to put in more or start earlier, I would have started earlier. Because I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but time is the factor. Because we could always, somehow generate more income or add more income or cut back expenses if we needed to add into our retirement. But once age 19 passes, it's over. And once age 25 passes, you don't get that day back. Can you kind of explain to us as the expert how that works with time versus the investment?
Yeah. So what happens is when you invest money, and typically a younger age, we're so encouraged by using something called a Roth IRA. And you don't ever invest in a Roth IRA. You invest in what's in a Roth IRA. And if you choose what's in a Roth IRA wisely, typically something that's going to grow market related, not just simply savings account, but if you get a Roth IRA and you invest in something that grows with market type rates of return, and you keep investing in that over time, it compounds. And so as an example, if you put in $1,000 and it earns $100, then the next year that $1,100 will earn interest on that $1,100. And that continues to compound each year. So this compounding effect means that you're earning money on your money. Now in a Roth IRA, if you do that every year over time, that compounds. And what happens at age 59 and a half, or whenever you decide to exit, or what we call pivot from traditional employment, you can actually pull all that money out completely tax-free. And the reason it's important to do that while you're young is because there's income limits on Roth IRAs. So you have to get money in there while you can, because it hits a certain point in your life where you can't do those anymore. So the compounding effect inside of Roth IRAs is one of the most attractive things for younger people to consider when they're growing their wealth.
Well, as you're speaking, I was pulling up a graphic here, and I'm sure you've heard of it too, but it's called the Ben versus Arthur example.
Love
and
it.
Just kind of in a nutshell, I don't think this is a hard and fast rule. I think this is more of a visualization to see the power of starting now or starting earlier. But Ben and Arthur are twin brothers. From age 19 to 26, Ben invests $2,000 a year. So I think he invested $16,000 total, and he stopped. But like you said, he left that money in there. So the growth was growth on top of growth the following year and the following year. So at age 26, he stops. Arthur comes along at age 27. He says, wow, my brother is crushing me here. I have $0 saved. He's been putting $2,000 away for the last 7-8 years. So Arthur comes along and he says, I'm going to invest $2,000 into the same exact fund, we'll call it, that Ben has, and I'm going to do it all the way to age 65. So the crazy thing is Ben invested for 8 years. He invested a total of $16,000. His brother Arthur invests for 36 years, a total of $72,000. And in the end, Ben has way more. He has about $800,000 more than his brother. So the guy who only put in $16,000 has $800,000 more. This is just an example they're using, which is just crazy to me. This is the stuff that not only does the middle class not know, that we were never taught, but this is not even taught in high schools.
It's not. You did a good job explaining that graph, even much better than me. I use that graph all the time. I think it's one of the most brilliant illustrations of the power of compounding. I hope your listeners can grab it wherever they can. because it's beautiful. And then I've gone back and said, well, wait, did they do the numbers right? And I did it in my calculators just to make sure, some guy didn't mess up. And I know this stuff. I'm like, that's legitimate. That really is the case. And so the Ben and Arthur thing is a beautiful illustration, and it is not taught enough. But there's a difference between financial intelligence and financial competency. So those of your listeners that will look at that and say, that's amazing, that's financial intelligence. Those that say that's amazing and do something about it, that's financial competency. And that's what I hunger for.
Hey guys, I just wanted to pause and take a second to say thank you from me to you for listening to and supporting the Money Peach podcast. Without listeners like you, this show definitely would not be possible, so thank you. The number one question that I receive is this: Peach, I just don't know where to start when it comes to my money. So many of us out there are living paycheck to paycheck. We have tons of debt. We're not making any headway. We can't save any money. We want to go on a freaking vacation where we pay cash for it. Oh, and let's talk about retirement savings and kids' college planning on top of that, right? Where do you start? Well, that's why we created the cash flow formula. The cash flow formula is the same system that Andrea and I used to pay off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And the best part is it's 100% free, meaning we are going to send you the free tools and a free lesson on how to set up your own cash flow formula. So to get started, go over to getcashflowformula.com. That's GET cashflowformula.com. Once again, head on over to getcashflowformula.com to get your free copy and your free lesson on how to get started the right way. All right, guys, now back to the show. So going into financial competency, which this is where I wanted to go. When I was kind of doing my research on you, I found that you use 3 big words here when you're teaching people the behavior about money. You talk about prepare, pivot, and purpose. Would you mind kind of walking us down what that means and how that relates to us?
Yeah, so prepare is the first. There's only really 3 major sections of our lives financially. Prepare is typically from age 18 to age 60, and that's more or less. It can be different for everyone, but that's the time where you prepare your lives financially for a second chapter, in which that second chapter down the road, you may not be able to work. Again, I talk about the certainty of uncertainty. You may not be able to work. I think most people in the middle class that I speak with, it's attractive to become wealthy, but the real heart of them, and us, I should say us, because I'm right there with everyone, is that we don't want to be dependent upon others. So preparing yourself financially for the uncertainty of uncertainty is that first phase from age 18 to age 60. And then 60 to 65 is an important part of your life where you pivot into the next chapter. Now, we don't want anybody to retire, because retirement by definition is the disposition of an asset over its useful life. So that would assume you're no longer useful. So we want you to pivot into the next chapter, and that next chapter would be purpose, meaning that it is time to do something great. People have time in this area of their lives. Hopefully they have money and wisdom. If they have purpose, the research is very clear. People who have a genuine purpose and act on that within a community live 7 years longer, have less cardiac arrest probability, and have less depression. And so purpose should be the sole reason that we even transition into that latter part of our lives. So it's prepare, pivot, which is practicing the next chapter, and then purpose.
So I just got done finishing this book called Halftime. And I don't know if you've heard of Halftime, but
yeah,
it kind of goes along. Yeah, it goes along the same premise that, you spend your whole life building success. But when we're in this part of building this success, we're not really asking the questions of, are we significant? What are we going to do once the success is over? What are we going to do once we pivot? And so, having purpose, having some kind of significance, I think I see a lot of people this, just in the fire department alone. Over the last decade of running all these calls, we go on a lot of people who are at that 65 to 75. And there's a huge difference physically and mentally when you see somebody who pivoted with purpose and who pivoted without a plan, which I think is just physically seeing that to me. When you were talking, I could completely picture what you're talking about. If somebody pivots and they have a purpose, they have a reason to wake up every day, they're excited, that's probably why they live longer, versus someone that's kind of like, okay, I just worked my entire life. I was running on this treadmill. I built a success and I stop. And it's like, now what do I do?
It's a great point. And to add to that, firefighters, they serve our communities very well. And many of my friends are firefighters, but the divorce rate with firefighters is very high. And so what happens is, if you've used coping mechanisms as a marriage, all the while you're raising kids, and then you pivot and you look at each other and say, who are you? and you're going to behave this way and you're going to spend money this way. That's what we call the graying of divorce in our country. It's the fastest rate of divorce in our country right now is the demographic who are transitioning into retirement. And so we have to have preemptive strike on that. That means in the pivot years, actually having conversations about expectations, concerns, our values and our goals, and making sure all those are aligned.
So let's go back, before we get to pivot, I want to kind of go back to prepare. So that's, I think, where the majority of us, including myself listening to the show, this is where we're at. And there's not enough education out there showing us, are we doing a good job? Are we saving enough? Should I be saving more? Is it okay to live a little? And so I was, looking through the sections on your book here. We'll get to your book here in a minute, but you have some of these. What are your 5 biggest behavior mistakes that you see in preparing?
Yeah. The first one I think it's worth mentioning is we don't pause. This is probably the biggest issue for those in the prepare section. What I mean by that is our purchasing decision-making is gone. When we used to have to cash a 20 to buy something, it doesn't happen anymore. We just swipe, right? And then on Amazon, one-click purchase. Our society today has taken away any friction that would require thinking. And as a result, since we've taken away the $20 bill from McDonald's makes $3.50 more per meal than they ever have in the past. And we are finding ourselves completely in debt and not able to save, not able to give because we're swiping so much. And there's no friction. There's no pause in our buying. We lean on mental heuristics, and those are shortcuts going with our gut. So you referenced one earlier, like, okay, I got to live a little. You only live once. Those are called heuristics that justify the lack of rational thinking that should take place. There's these marketing firms, and they're just so mischievous and they're brilliant. If they put in the smell of apple pie in an appliance store, it's 23% more likely that we buy. If they give us chocolate before we walk in the store, it's more likely that we buy. Mischievous marketing machines are brilliant, and they are playing a very difficult game with our minds. And then we are not even prepared. We just swipe. And before you know it, we look up and we're completely broke. So my suggestion to anybody accumulating wealth is to add a degree of pause in all of your spending. The more zeros, the longer the pause. That includes the iPhone X, but that also includes the Starbucks. And that definitely includes the car.
I couldn't agree more. I remember when I was learning about all this money talk and this money stuff, behavior was one of the big things I was looking at. And I remember one thing that I found right away was how, like you said, McDonald's was one of the first, if not the first fast food chain to take plastic. And when they did that, nothing changed. The menu stayed the same. Everything stayed the same, except they started including plastic. You could pay with a debit card. And they had a huge spike in profits just from that. So we have an online program. It's called Awesome Money Course, Darryl, that one of the challenges we have in I think week 2 of the program is we challenge people to go and use cash only. And the reason why is, for those of us listening, let's just pay attention here. Let's go through the scenario. If you go to the gas station and you're on your cell phone, you're talking, you walk up to the gas station, you pump, you put the card in and out and you drive away. And I would ask you right there, how much gas did you pump? Be like, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 bucks. I have no idea, right? But you'll pay for it later because it's on plastic. Or if you stop what you're doing, pause, I like what you said, pause, and you literally have to walk into the gas station and hand, an old Benjamin or a couple 20s, and you hand them over and slap them on the counter and say, pump 7. I don't care who you are, what kind of income you make, that feels different because you're releasing that money in real time. I think you probably know about this as well, but MIT did that study talking about how the pain receptors in the brain are used when you use cash, but not when you use plastic.
That's right. I was completely broke. I mean, this was 15 years ago, and I was already a certified financial planner with a couple degrees, so I knew money, but I was broke. And it's just sad to say, I had to use a cash advance to pay my mortgage. We sold everything, and I didn't have to file bankruptcy, but the reason that I fought out of it was because we stopped using every single plastic, and we carried envelopes around, and we did that for 15 years straight. Envelopes, everything was cash. It was always cash. Christmas, eating, Home Depot, everything was cash. And when the envelope was empty, we were done spending. That discipline was what got us out from our financial hole to where we're at today, which is a very comfortable place. But had we not done that, we would have compounded the mistakes that we had made in the years before.
I love it. All right, let's go to what's the second one you can give us, the second biggest behavior mistakes that we make with money.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat on the same lines to a certain degree, but it's not having a filter for decision making. And so we have a lot of big decisions that we make in life. And sometimes when we're in financial crunches, there's only so much we can do to get out of debt. We need a bigger shovel. We need to make better career decisions. And so the idea of having a filter to make better decisions is important. Many people make decisions based on their gut or how they feel, but a filter is a set of questions that you would ask before you make big decisions. For example, one of my filters in life whenever I make a tough decision is, did I ask a child, a friend, and a sage? And by asking each of those people, I get different answers. And the child, believe it or not, is a very interesting way to get clarity, because if you can communicate a complex idea to a child, you've thought through it well. So, for example, when I wrote my first book, I was totally confused and concerned because the investment of money I'd have to put in, time, and putting myself out there emotionally. I went to my group. My group is called C12, and I went to my C12 group of peers and to my son and to a wise man, and I relayed it all out there. Had I not had that word of encouragement from them, I would have never written my first book. So a filter for decision making prevents you from being overconfident in your decisions or lack of confidence. Many of us are risk averse, and so it allows us to have some rational decision making. So creating a list of filters is really important.
Can you give me like a practical example of that, a filter that you use in your own life so we could just apply that?
Yeah. So have you considered, for example, when we make business decisions, have we considered all stakeholders and the indirect consequences of our decisions? I wish politicians did this, right?
Yeah.
And you just kind of practically think through, okay, if I make this business decision, how will my customers react? If we had to pull a product off of our shelves because it wasn't profitable, how would our business owners, clients feel if we were no longer offering this specific retirement plan? And so sometimes you just think about the one group of people, but having a filter says, no, did I think about all stakeholders that might be impacted? That means our business owners, but also the CPAs who used to refer business to us. So it really asks you to sit down and kind of critically think through all stakeholders who might be impacted through your decisions. That includes if you're making a personal decision, did I consider how this might impact my wife or my children or our neighborhood, our community, our church?
So I need to take your advice because I can't tell you how many times I have said, oh, this sounds like a good decision. I make it. And 2 months down the road, I'm thinking, what did I say yes to? I didn't put that filter in place. It could be, I just added on 20% more work, but I didn't have that time to add on 20% more work. So where am I going to spend time with the family now? Where's that time coming from? Or if we say, you know what, yeah, let's go ahead and do this backyard remodel. And we just say yes, but we don't actually sit down and do a budget on it. And all of a sudden we get to the end and our envelopes ran out and we're like, great, now we have a half backyard, right? There's so many of these filters that I should have had in place. And I've never heard it explained like that, so I really like it. So you have a book called 18 to 80, and I know a lot of these behavior money mistakes are going to be inside that book, but tell me a little bit about 18 to 80 and why you wrote it.
What 18 to 80 was written because, first of all, I've been a big fan of Dave Ramsey for years and years, and so really followed in his footsteps. But what had happened was over the years, I just started to collect stories of people, and I was journaling these conversations I was seeing thousands and thousands of people in the middle class all the time and talking about real life issues. And so I would just blog on them. And then I looked at my collection of blogs and I captured it in a way that I thought people might be able to digest. And I wanted to make a book because I realized today that a lot of us don't read like we used to. And so the book is just, I'm not going to talk about your amygdala part of your brain and the cerebral cortex and all that, but much of it is rooted in behavioral finance. Behavioral finance is a collision of neuroscience, psychology, and traditional finance. But I formatted it in a way that the middle class can take away nuggets. Okay, if somebody said, I'm 50, then they can go directly to the chapter for age 50 and take some nuggets that will be applied specifically for that age. And then they can say, I'm concerned about my son who's 30, and then they can go to 30, and they could say, I'm concerned about my mom who's 70. And they can look at age 70. So it gives them a snapshot for their finances in an easy, digestible way that is evidence-based and actually very much rooted in practical ways that I've worked with clients over the years.
Okay, so I did not know that. So that's pretty neat. So this is a book you could read all the way through, but it's in a culture where everything is on demand and we can get it now. I like the idea of being 50 years old and saying, look, this is a great book. In the beginning, we talk about age 20, but I'm not age 20. I need to just know what's going on for age 50. And so I really like that. Where can we find this book, 18 to 80?
So you can certainly find it on my website at paxfinancialgroup.com, or you can certainly get it on Amazon. It will be available October 16th, 2018, and we will launch it then. And we'll have, of course, the ebook and the traditional paperback and the audio, which on this book, this is my third book. This is the first time I've done the audio myself. and maybe the last time, because that was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun. So we'll have an audio version available for your listeners too.
All the links he just mentioned right there, the Pax Financial Group, links to Amazon, we'll have all of those in the show notes. So that's going to be moneypeach.com/session110. That's moneypeach.com/session110. Hey, Darryl, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. This was fun. You and I mean, we speak the exact same language. As you're talking, I was smiling, kind of nodding my head saying, yes, that's exactly what I've been trying to say. That's exactly that's on my mind. And I think it's good to have two different people saying it in two different ways, but kind of ending up in the same spot. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun. Keep fighting the good fight. You're doing good stuff.
All righty, sir. Good luck on your book, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that Darryl and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session110. That's moneypeach.com/session110. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. And lastly, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for listening to and supporting the show. It means the world to me. I love doing this show, but I love doing it because I know on the other end of my voice, there are people listening, they're learning, they're taking action, and they're doing real things with their life and money. And I'm excited that that's possible. But if you want to help us reach more people, which I hope you do, we would love it if you wouldn't mind leaving us a positive review, a 5-star rating in any of the places where you listen to podcasts. You can do that in the podcast with Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere where you listen to podcasts. Hop in there, leave us a review. It helps us out a ton. Thank you guys so much for listening. You rock. Have a great week, and God bless you. Boom,